All right, welcome back, everyone. Got another great episode, season 3, Beneath the Helmet. I'm your host, Arjuna George, former fire chief, now turned author, podcaster, coach, and here with another great guest, talking everything mental health for the first responder world. So today I get to sit down with a former firefighter from Brampton, Ontario, now the owner of Fire to Light, the CEO of Fire to Light. I got Brandon Evans on the air.
It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
So welcome to the show, Brandon.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And where are you tuning in from today?
I am tuning in from Costa Rica today.
Yes, beautiful. I love it. Love it. So Brandon, tell our listener a little bit about who Brandon is, kind of your background of what brought you into the fire service, but also I think you're one of the few, including myself, who decided to leave the fire service, maybe before our time per se. The classic time of reaching age limit of retirement, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah. So it's funny because when I called OMERS, right, about dealing with the pension, all that kind of stuff, the lady was like, "You can't retire." I'm like, "Well, I'm retiring." She's like, "But you're too young." I'm like, "Well, is there like an age limit? Like, what does that mean?" She's like, "No, I guess." I don't know. So it was a whole interesting thing with
you. Often.
You don't see it that often, right? But yeah, no, like my journey starts back, I think like most firefighters when I was a kid, right? Like there was some really like prominent influence in my life from my best friend as a child growing up, whose father was a firefighter. And then my wife, we started dating in high school, and her father was a chief. So I had these like amazing examples. As it comes time, you start to like look at life a little bit differently. But high school comes to an end. What are you going to do with what are you going to do with the rest of your life? These two like role models, these guys, they always came home and they like loved their job. I was like, oh, like these are two adults, the few of the adults in my life that like they're happy about what they're doing. Like they like work. They don't seem overly stressed out. They speak really highly about their jobs. And I wasn't, the best at academia when I was in high school. I liked working with my hands. And so it was kind of like an easy avenue of like, oh, I'll just try to go down this path and become a firefighter. And I did. So that was like really, it was incredible once it started, and you start doing the training. It was the first time for me where I really excelled in academia because I was focusing on something that I really enjoyed doing. Parts of it just became like second nature. Like throwing ladders on roofs and slugging hose and all. Like I could work. I was a workhorse. I could do those things and start applying building construction and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a bit of a journey to get hired on. When I came out of college, there weren't a lot of departments in Ontario that were doing hirings. So I got into construction as a contractor, working for someone else, eventually working for myself. And then wanted to gain some experience. So I actually went out your way to British Columbia and I got involved with a contractor out there and spent a season doing wildland firefighting, which was amazing. And that just kind of opened my eyes. That was the first time that I'd really kind of stepped outside my box of where I lived and just exposure to life outside of Ontario. As a kid, we didn't travel around too much. I shouldn't say that. We traveled a lot in Ontario playing hockey. I got 4 brothers. We all played rep hockey. So there was a lot of like, traveling on the 401, going to hockey games. But there were 4 of us, that was, you go day by day and do the best you can. And so after that season of forest firefighting, I happened to have some friends who were traveling internationally. And so I maybe took a bit of an unconventional route, but I got a 1-year work visa in New Zealand. And and I took off. I went to New Zealand for what was supposed to be a year. I spent 4 months there, and then I ended up backpacking for 18 months around the world. Went to all kinds of places, did all kinds of things. And when I came back from that experience, I dove head on into getting hired in the fire department. And so I knew there was a recruitment that was coming up in Brampton, and I just kind of put those feelers out as many places as I could over the next 12 months. And yeah, I mean, the rest speaks for itself. Got hired and kind of got sucked into that whole first responder firefighter life. Um, and yeah, it's been incredible, right? I was volunteering for a few years before that, kind of off and on in Brampton, right? As the city was kind of expanding on the outskirts, we had two little volunteer departments or volunteer halls that were still happening. They're no longer because of urban sprawl. And yeah, it just one thing led to the next. I mean, you spent this career. I was 11 years in Brampton, and now I'm here in Costa Rica. So there's some space in between that,
Yes,
obviously.
yes.
But it just you never know how life is going to unfold. And so keep the story short. For right now, that's where we are. We ended up in Costa Rica. I did end up retiring from the service. And there was a lot of factors at play in that. It wasn't just I need to get out of here, not by any stretch. I deeply miss it, and I really loved being a firefighter. It was a great job, and I'm really excited about the work that I'm doing now. This excites me. It keeps me going day after day. Um, the life of an entrepreneur isn't exactly all desirable for lots of reasons. Um, but it's working. It's working for our family, which is most important. I got two young kids, a 12-year-old, she just turned 12, and an 8-year-old. And so, they are the focal point of our life. And so that was the key decision in us staying down here. So I'd come down on a leave of absence. So moving through COVID, there was a lot of things that happened. And I got to a point where I reached out to my deputy and asked or I let him know that I was working on this project, which transformed into Fire to Light, creating preventative fitness programs for the fire service. So he was really supportive of the work that I was doing. And he said, "What do you need from me?" I said, "Well, if you could could I get any time off? Even an unpaid leave would be great." I didn't want it to be attached to the department because I knew there'd be a lot of red tape that I didn't kind of want in the way. And anyways, there was a corporate policy, and I got 12 months off. I didn't expect it. I was like, okay. And so once I got the leave of absence, my wife and I just kind of looked at each other and we said, "Hey, do you want to go do that thing that we'd always talked about doing?" There was a number of factors and ways that we could, support ourselves for that year off. And and so we just took advantage of it and we said, "Yeah, let's go and do it." And so Costa Rica was just like was supposed to be the first stop on a trip, and kind of see how things would go and see how things would evolve, how the kids would react and respond to kind of traveling abroad. And 2.5 years later, we're still here. So
Incredible. I truly get the sense you are living life. You're not letting life slide by. You are living life fully. Would that summarize you correctly, or?
yeah, I think so. I think like anyone, it kind of depends on the day. Like we
Yeah.
live in paradise.
Mhm.
It presents its own challenges as anywhere else does. But I get to do a lot of incredible things. I mean, it's different and there's a lot of incredible things in Canada as well. We've been spending the summers back there. We're back in Canada about 3 months a year. Just family, summers on the lake, that kind of stuff, right? Um, but no, life is good. It's like you never know what's going to happen, or how you're going to get to certain places. So like this was a dream for us. And going through COVID, uh, my wife and I had owned and operated a CrossFit gym. We opened it 18 months before COVID started, and it was closed for over 2 years in Ontario, and we ended up closing that gym. So that business was struck incredibly hard during COVID. There's a lot of financial disruption because of that. We lost a lot of money. And it was just like it was hell going through that. Open, close, open, close, open, close. It was a bit of a nightmare. And so trying to manage that on top of having the kids basically home for 2 years. My son was just in kindergarten. My daughter was in grade 2 or grade 3 at the time. That was challenging enough. Being a first responder during COVID was challenging. Every time you go into a call, you got to suit up, hazmat suit on just to go in for a medical, your average medical call. Um, and there was an event, right? Like we responded to a house fire in December of 2020. Another lockdown was about to just be announced. It would have been the second or third at that point. And this was like everyone knew it was going to be the longest one that we had gone through yet, and we just had 4 or 5 months of this first lockdown where nobody knew what was happening. And it was a homicide. We extracted this woman from a house fire. I was part of that team. So you come out, you got someone else's skin, right? Body parts all over yourself. And I came home and I exploded. It was the cherry on top of the cake for me that kind of pushed me over the edge. I found myself, yelling, screaming, swearing, and I physically pushed my 4-year-old to the ground. And it was my wife looked at me and she was like, "You need help." And I was like, "Yeah, I do need help." And so for me, it was like I got back on the train, right? Like the next day, I called a therapist, I booked a neurolinguistic programming session, booked a breathwork session, and I took a very deep dive over the next 12 months into that healing journey of what that would mean, which that helped me make this great big huge decision in my life at that point to close the gym, to go to back on a lease that I had signed. I still had 2 years left on the lease almost, with a massive national corporation. And so there was all this fear of like, am I going to get sued? Am I going to do this? When like the clarity came around, like this thing needs to go. Financially, it's been absolutely destroyed. It's not worth putting any more money into it right now. And I just knew in my heart that I needed to move on from it, not knowing what the next steps were going to be. And so we made that decision. And I just started observing, my life and what I had done. I started observing what was happening at the fire hall. There was a lot of people who were going off, right? The vaccine, no vaccine was a big issue. And there were a lot of other issues as well that surfaced for a lot of people during COVID. And so there's a lot of questions like, why is so-and-so going off? Why aren't they coming back? How come some people have been off for these extended periods of time? And so I started looking into like, what are we doing? What kind of training have I done in the mental health space for firefighters? And I looked at myself, whereas I did not go off on a leave of absence for trauma related, right? I went through my own battles with critical incident stress, but I was never on an official PTSD leave, if you will. I was never diagnosed. There was a few days that I took, and my district chief was really supportive of me for that. But I realized like I had a toolbox full of tools. Like this wasn't something that was new to me. Therapy wasn't new to me. Doing the work wasn't necessarily new. It was something that I'd been introduced to many, many years ago. Backpacking, traveling around the world, right? Being introduced to things like breath work, like meditation, like consciousness, spirituality. How can you learn more about these areas of yourself that may be unknown or just there was curiosities for me, at least in this space around consciousness. And so I had noticed that I had a toolbox. And when I went over the waterfall, I opened it up and I started using the tools, right? Like when a wall in your house falls down, you can sit there and look at it, wait for the rest of the house to crumble, or you can start putting up support walls, right? And start to rebuild the thing even stronger so that hopefully it doesn't collapse again. And as I looked into the training that I had been given, I started just diving deeper and deeper and deeper into talking to other firefighters. What are they doing? What kind of support have you had? What kind of training have you had in this space? And so I started putting these pieces together on the preventative side of things, right? And trying to put what we call a mental fitness program together. And that led to a whole bunch of other things that manifested with Fire to Light. But yeah, there's a little bit
Yeah.
of an intro and a tidbit into kind of like where I kind of started in terms of getting into the fire service and all those kinds of things, and a little bit of my story, and then where we are now.
Yeah. And when I said you're living life, it wasn't just the last couple of years in Costa Rica. from your story, it sounds like you were living life for a lot of your life. You experienced it fully. You weren't just coasting through. So I just wanted to recognize that. It sounds
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
a nice journey.
It's, I mean, I've been really fortunate. I've been really lucky. And for whatever reason, just took advantage of opportunities when they popped up. Right. And there was a lot of like diving into the unknown, like there was, it's interesting because there's like portions of this time where, so for an example, I was in Egypt and it was one of the, like, I was so down. I was just kind of done. I've been, it's an incredible place. It's bucket list, check it off. I'm there riding the camel around the pyramids. Like it's absolutely incredible. But in that moment when I was there, I was homesick. I just wanted to go home. That's all I wanted to do. I'd been months and months and months out in the world doing, experiencing things. And to your point, like that's life sometimes, right? That's outliving life. What's been interesting is that journey, for example, like I was supposed to be working in New Zealand for a year. That was my plan. That didn't happen. I worked there for 3 months, but that didn't happen. And so it was this like, I don't know, just like learning how to step into the unknown. And that year and a half really taught me like it's all going to be okay. Even prior to that, like I didn't have a job when I drove out to British Columbia. I had a list of contractors. I applied with the province, didn't get on, especially being out of province. And so I called all these contractors. They're like, well, if you ain't here, we can't really hire you. So I packed up my pickup truck and I drove out. And I said, okay, I'm here. Found a place to live, tried to get a scope as where the best place would be. And eventually one of them said, yeah, I'll give you a job. And that was it. And so going traveling and backpacking, you get involved in this world where you can do almost whatever you want. Like you wake up in the day, there was no agenda, there was no plan. And that might mean you're booking a plane trip to another country. And you were talking like backpacker budget, right? Like not spending all kinds of things. This isn't extravagant, spending thousands and thousands of dollars. Like I lived off of less than $14,000 for 18 months. It wasn't like big extravagant travels, right? You're living off a backpack roughly 15 years ago. And so it's this like you start to learn about taking risks and about the ability that like it's going to be okay and you don't know what's going to happen and that's okay. We think we know what's going to happen in life day to day to day, but it's not always the case. And so it I mean, it definitely helped make this decision to relocate our family to Central America a lot easier. Like we had reps in that space, and it wasn't just about the job. It wasn't just about a pension. It wasn't just about a paycheck. It wasn't just about the money and the benefits. Like all those things are amazing. The job is amazing. I love the job. Most importantly, it was about our kids, and it's like how can we provide an environment to give something a little bit different for our kids, to help them learn a new language, understand a different culture, and help to expose them to the world. Because like the biggest things that, for me anyways, that have come out of traveling outside of food are you get to know about people and you really get a firsthand at culture and what other culture is. It's, Canada is a very multicultural place, depending on where you live. We happen to live in one of these towns that was very multicultural. And so you get a sense of that. But then when you go to someone else's home and you walk in their shoes, on their streets, in their environment, it just changes. It changes your perspective of how you look at that. And that was always something that really struck me. I just was always in awe whenever I went to a new country, traveling around, just looking at everything, the smells, the food, the way that life happens. And the big picture, it's like, well, we're all the same. We just do things a little bit differently. And so I guess, we're still doing it. When the decision came up and my deputy called me, he's like, you coming back to work? I'm like, I don't think so. As like, our kids,
Yeah.
our kids really, really took to being here. My daughter, especially in the first 6 to 12 months, the shifts in her own confidence really started to shine through. And so that was the biggest thing, understanding what was happening in their school system back home. versus the opportunities that they have here. We just chose to maintain that education stream for them because it was benefiting them, and so it was a tough one. But we'd been through a lot of big tough decisions in the last couple of years, from going through COVID, from closing the gym to saying yes to diving back into getting help, which is not an easy thing, right? And then to wow, I guess am I really gonna pull the trigger on this and dive full into Fire to Light and see if we can't make a go of it. So
Well, you're making a difference, that's for sure.
thank you.
Yeah, like I said, I keep going back to your story. I think it really resonates on, it really set you up to be an entrepreneur. Like you said, the risk taking, the trying new things, stepping outside of your comfort zones, all those life experiences led you to be successful as an entrepreneur. So I think that's pretty special. What for the listener right now is kind of like maybe in the same shoes as you or I in the fire service, what was it that really kind of made you make that final decision to leave earlier than you were expected to leave the fire service? And that expectation could be your own or yours or people around you. Like I said before,
Yeah,
it's that
yeah.
expectation of retiring at 55, 60, whatever that looks like.
So I don't know if I always kind of knew that I wouldn't retire at 60. I never really, I shouldn't say always, I would say like, within the first 5 years of being a firefighter, you go through, we had these classifications for the first 3, 4 years. Once you get through all your classifications, first class firefighter, you kind of settle in a little bit. Then I really got into entrepreneurship in terms of investigation and starting the gym and all that kind of stuff. Um, but there was always this piece of like, maybe I won't. As a young firefighter, like, all right, maybe I'll be the chief one day. That was, you have these ambitions. There's a direct line to how to climb the ladder and do all those things. So part of it was like watching how those positions shifted and navigating, being like, oh, like I don't want that job. Like I like my job on the back of the truck, and I don't want to. It's more money, but I don't want to do that. Um, and so I was happy being on the back of the truck. As I got more mature in my role, I was happy leading from the back of the truck. Um, and there was just something like I just kind of knew I wouldn't retire. I didn't realize that it would happen as quickly as it did. Like it really just kind of crept up on me. I had no idea. If you had asked me 3 months before my chief granted me that leave of absence, I would have told you I probably would have been there until I was 50 at a minimum. Um, and so it was like to understand. I didn't have so to get back to the question, right? I didn't have this expectation that I would just live off my firefighter pension after I retired at 60. And I remember sitting around the coffee table at the fire hall and listening to some young firefighters talking about how much money they're going to make when they retire. I'm like, man, like you don't even have like 5, let alone 10 or 20 years on. Like it's not like it's 5 years away. And like I said, I love the job and I was bored. I was bored. And so, there would have been a more, I could have been occupied more had I had a desire to write for an acting captain and done the captain's exams, the promotional exams, those kinds of things, but I didn't want to. And outside of the thrill of those few calls that we get, and I worked a busy truck in the town that was firefighting. I wasn't at like a small country volunteer hall. The calls were great when you had them, but they were still few and far between. Like you're going to mainly medical calls, right? Difficulty breathing, which is all good.
Yep. Shortness of breath. Yep.
So I wasn't being challenged anymore, to the extent that I wanted to be. And I just really dove into entrepreneurship while I was firefighting. That was my part-time job, and I had like COVID also presented an opportunity to spend a lot of time with our kids. That got stripped away a bit, working 24-hour shifts, and then go into this new business that I just started, there was a lot of time away, and so as we got to spend more time with the children, because they weren't even at school, they were home now. That was both a blessing and a curse, right? Because it can be extremely frustrating at times and extremely beautiful. And so they became the priority. And I just I was never geared down and focused on the money side of things, that like this must be the only way. Um, I think that year abroad traveling around, like I really learned how to stretch a dollar. Sometimes you're literally sleeping with rats, eating street food, all that kind of stuff. Um, but it was like learning to become okay with not knowing where that's going to come from tomorrow, and that like you'll figure it out. Like being confident with the skill set that I had, that like, oh, like I've learned a lot of things in my life. Like I'm clearly capable. And I would keep asking myself this question of like, well, what if I got fired tomorrow? We're under the understanding, at least in Canada, that like, oh, this is a golden secure job. Everything's going to be okay. It might not. There were departments in Canada who fired firefighters during COVID. Like that happened. They let them go. They may have got their jobs reinstated and they may have got them back, but like that was a real thing. And so I just kind of like that kind of rolled through my mind often. And so it wasn't just being solely focused. I've had conversations with firefighters who've been off on extended leaves, right? And that's the biggest fear of like, what am I going to do now? So it's this like identity crisis, right? That maybe I just went through a bit earlier in my life than most do, of like, okay, I can be this and I can also do that. I can also try this. I can also bring these elements in. So like getting into entrepreneurship while I was firefighting, maybe that helped with that identity issue of being a first responder, or this identity crisis that a lot of firefighters go through, right? Especially as you enter the brink of retirement. Oh, they've told me that I must put in another 5 years. I got to get my best five in, whatever that means. I think the real question is like, are you happy? Like, is it fulfilling your life? Is this still the greatest job in the world for you? Because I think it's arguable that any job can be the greatest job in the world. And there was a huge chunk of time where firefighting for me was the greatest job in the world. And there were other times where it sucked. And I think that most firefighters could agree with that. Like there's some really shitty days. And sometimes it's okay to be the one to get up and go back to that environment because you know that you can deal with it and manage it. Or maybe that's just a perception. And I think that's okay. It's okay. It's okay that it might not be the right job for you anymore. And I think there's a lot of individuals who get trapped, right? And they might be off. So they might not actually be doing the job because you're off on a leave. And so you don't have this greatest job in the world anymore. It wasn't what you thought it would be for you. And now you're actually doing a disservice to yourself by just staying there because you're collecting it, because you don't know what to do next. And so it's like, there's a means to deal with things, when we're injured for whatever reason. And that's amazing that those things exist and those systems are in place and they're needed for a chunk of time. And how is it serving you? Or is it serving you? So I think, my advice would be to like, try and be as honest as you can with yourself and really question it, right? Like if you got fired today, would you be able to figure out your financial situation tomorrow? The answer would probably be yes. You might not know what that looks like. You might not know what it's going to be or where it's going to come from, but are you capable? I would agree that you are. And so, I don't know if those are questions that a lot of us ask ourselves, right? Some get excited about the idea of retiring, and you know, suicide is a huge issue with retirees. All kinds of diseases are issues with retirees. There's a lot of things that happen after we retire, especially if there's no plan in place. And so a lot of us, the plan is like, I'm just going to drink margaritas on the beach, whether it's at the cottage or whatever that's going to be. but we're so used to like showing up to the same place with the same people in a comfortable environment with what really is a select few who actually understand our life, right? Who understand the totality of what it means to be a firefighter that people on the outside don't understand because they haven't worn the boots. They don't get it. And that becomes it can become a challenge when you're now left alone without those people in this place of retirement, without something to occupy your time. And so, there's some that do retirement amazing. They're crushing it. And
Very few.
there's a
Very few.
there yeah, there's a lot that are like, I think there's a lot more firefighters of any rank who are just waiting to retire. I only got 5 years left. Like 5 years is a long time, man. That's a long
Totally agree.
time.
100%
It's a
agree.
long time. So I don't know
And I
if I
think a couple
fully
of the
answered the
words you,
question there for you, but
oh yeah, no, that's great. I think just for the listener listening right now, just to hear it, another experience of somebody,
Mm.
being okay to leave the fire service, because I think that's the message, right? It's okay to leave if it's not for you.
Right,
And I think that was the key words that you used was for you.
right.
Best job in the world for you. Easiest job in the world for you. Whatever that looks like, but it's for
Yep,
you, right? So
yep.
beautiful, love it. So going into fire to light. Well, first of all, fire, pretty self-explanatory. What's the light part of your name of this company, this business?
That it's the name came together pretty quick for me
Oh,
when you're getting in those early stages, but it's you're moving because you got to go through the shit. That's it if you want to get to the other side. And so that's the light. The light is the other side. It's you know, and you
there's
climb a
a
mountain, there's going to be
spiritual sound to it. Is that correct?
yeah,
Would you say that? Yeah.
there's a bit of a spiritual ring to it, It obviously speaks to the industry with the fire right there. But that's it. It's like, our health journey exists for all of us in all capacities. And I don't think that you can escape the mental or psychological side of that in any capacity. We all have good days. We all have bad days. Sometimes the bad days seem to roll on. Sometimes the good days seem to roll on, and all those things are real. And we all have things from time to time that we struggle with. Some of those things we're really good at managing. Other things we're not. Um, I don't think it's like a secret. Like there's mental health things happening for first responders in the fire service, things happening globally. It's not the first time we've heard of a mental health crisis happening. Um, and maybe it's more of like an awareness and in this level of understanding is rising as we start to look at these things differently that may have been suppressed at a communal level in the past, right? And so, yeah, Fire to Light is just about like it's just like fighting a fire, right? Face those things head on. A lot of fires happen at night. And when the sun breaks in the morning, sometimes there might look like you just went through hell because the fire is so burnt,
Yeah.
right? And if you had one of those lucky calls where you're able to make a save, like that's those are really powerful moments in our lives, and there's not a lot of them. There's few of them. Um, some people never get that experience, but when you do, it's magic, man, right? Like, and so like that's the light. It's like when you overcome something in your life that you didn't know if you could overcome, and you see shifts for yourself. Those are great, big, huge moments, right? For someone else, it might not be, but for you, that's a great, big, huge. That's a great, big, huge win, achievement moment, Um, and so that's it. There's a lot of fear around and stigma around mental health and thinking that everyone's just trying to get us to sit in a circle, kumbaya, and share our deepest, darkest secrets and I don't even know what they are, let alone needing to share them with some stranger or my friends who may turn that around on me in this fear of being made fun of or whatever that thing might be. Um, but the interesting part of that is like when people do share their vulnerabilities and they become comfortable sharing their story and they do share those pieces, people usually listen and they become inspired by it in some capacity. And so it's about like learning what that means for each of us and how do we tap into different areas of ourself that maybe we didn't even know existed before so that we can become better. In the fire service, every day is about training to be better, learning from past experiences, taking new steps, and mastering the basics, doing the things over and over again so that it becomes muscle memory, but then not forgetting about it, still doing it, still pumping water off the truck, still hitting a hydrant, even though you've been on for 25 years, like embedding those things into the culture. And so yeah, man, that's the light. It's just, it's learning to, create, I don't know what words we want to use, right? We throw resilience around quite often in the fire service, right? We need to be more resilient, be more resilient. Um, and there's some of it for sure, but like, I'm like, how do I become more resilient? You're telling me to be more resilient, but how do I, how do I do that? That may be a part for me, at least, that I saw that might be needing some improvements on in the service. Like, how do I actually do that? Become more gritty and face those things head on, because most firefighters have conversations with other people or citizens, and oh my God, I don't know how you do your job. I could never do your job. Cool. I could never be an accountant and just sit in a chair all day and run numbers. Like, I couldn't do that. So to each their own. Let's just go and master our things. And so we're already incredibly resilient people. And this is just another area where it's like, yeah, it's big. Yeah, it's scary. And like, we know the results of it. Like what was shocking but not surprising was so I conducted a research study in 2024. And one of the things that we learned, it was on the current state of mental health in the fire service, was that over 77% of the chiefs and leaders I interviewed, fire chiefs and fire leaders, over 77% of them know another firefighter who has died by suicide. Like, that's a high number. So we know this is something that impacts us. And so those decisions happen in a very short window, right? And so it's like, how are we training people to like push through that window, to hop over and be like, okay, maybe just one more day, right? Maybe just one more day, one more minute, one more hour. Can I keep going for just one more hour? Just wait till the kids get home from school, and then at least it gives you one more day. And so that's the light. It was said to me at one point that like, and so to each their own, right? I wouldn't say that I'm a very religious person. I don't go to church. I don't abide by any specific religion. There's a few of them that I've studied, some more than others. But it said that like God just needs to grace your presence for a moment, right? That's where miracles happen. It's just like one moment of like, oh, there's something bigger than me that I'm connected to in this world. And sometimes that sticks with you for the rest of your life. And so to find those moments of excitement of a miracle for yourself, at some point, someone who suffers with substance abuse may say, oh, maybe I don't need that anymore. It's like a different voice is speaking to them and they start to change course. And it's not easy. It's really challenging. And they may be sober for the rest of their life, 10 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. But it's like those moments, they come in briefly. And so it's like to be able to be aware of those and attune to them just enough to hold on to it so that it becomes a part of you, that can carry on for the rest of your life. And so like I've had those experiences to be like, oh, okay, let's just keep going. So
Just
that's
where
that's where the
mental,
light speaks to.
yeah, I love it. I love it. And like I said, it definitely has a spiritual tone to it that I can picture in my mind, fire to light, right? So very visual. So is this where mental fitness comes into play? Is this building this, like we talked about resilience, or another word we could use, but the grit, the determination to move through challenges or to make big decisions and pivot life completely, right? Is that
Yeah.
where mental fitness comes in? And maybe what is mental fitness for the listener who's like, I don't understand. Is this lifting weights or not?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yes. So I kind of I looked at the training that I did um, for mental health related within the fire service. And like I said, it felt that there was this overriding message of we need you to be more resilient. Had conversations with, can you even teach resilience? And there wasn't a lot of, here's some tools to build resilience. And so in the gym world, in the fitness world, there's two sides to fitness, right? There's therapy side, once you get injured, and recovery side. And prior to that, there's fitness, exercise, preparation, and there's a whole wealth of things that go along with that. Um, and so as I looked at the mental fitness side of things and reflected on my own journey, or the mental health side of things and reflected on my own journey, it was fairly clear that like there was a lot of reps that I got in on the fitness side of my own mental health. It wasn't just a therapy side. It wasn't just, well, I can't prevent PTSD because I can't prevent the traumatic events from happening. And I might not be able to prevent some massive traumatic event internally, critical incident stress happening from inside of me. However, I do think that we can prepare for that and we can start to build tools and repetitions of how to manage our stress, how to deal with the mental side, the physical side, and how those things are connected within our bodies, within our lives. And so it's fitness for the mind and for the heart. Like, how can we build tools to keep going? I think that that we've done a poor job by segregating health, spiritual health, mental health, fitness, nutritional health, right? Um, and that's great. Like we have different elements of our health that we can identify and work on, and they all work together. At no time is one separate from the other. They all impact each other, and they're all intrinsically connected. Like it's such a deep level. And so the mental fitness side is like, yeah, like let's start looking at this differently. Mental health alone, for me anyways, it carries a lot of negative connotation. Just think back to our own childhood and like what that meant when someone said, "Oh, mental health issues, go to get institutionalized," like all these things because of, you know, we weren't there yet. We didn't understand enough about it yet. And now, like, we know there's a lot of tools that we can use, whether it's through nutrition, whether it's through physical exercise, whether it's through meditation or breath work or journaling, affirmations, the way that we think, changing the way that we think, changing our behaviors, all of these types of things that can benefit our life. And so if we can start to understand what those are, understand what works best for me, right? Again, it's like what works best for you and give those things some opportunity, just like training in the gym. If you go in on day one, you do a few bicep curls, like, man, my arms are sore. I'm probably never going to do that again. I don't like the feeling. Like, good luck being physically fit. Like, good luck, you know? However, if you dive into that in some capacity or any capacity, right, you're going to have the farmer who works outside all day long, who's incredibly physically fit, who's never lifted a dumbbell or a barbell in their life, versus the average gym goer. Again, someone who's really physically fit. So it's like finding what works for you and doing those things consistently. And so Fire to Light helps to expose us to what some of those tools at least are, and to help you identify like what are the things you're already doing that would be considered mental fitness, so that we can start to think about our own actions in a different light, in a different perspective from maybe what we're currently doing.
Love it. So you talked about this research that you did, the study that you did, and I think that's probably a pretty key foundation to Firelight. Would you say that's correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with this document that's very, very in depth, was there any surprises or any changes of perception of the fire service post research?
Yep. Yep. So the first thing that popped in my mind when you on the second thing, changes of perceptions. Um, there's as a firefighter, The perception definitely shifted of like there's a lot of chiefs that care. And so it's like I gained a lot of understanding of a leader's role, of the chief's role within the fire service that I was simply unaware of before. That kind of shifted a little bit getting into entrepreneurship because you're leading your own business. And so you just start to look at things a little bit differently. But I would often have conversations with firefighters like, oh yeah, talk what are all those chiefs having to say. There's a lot of places where you have this like, there's heads that are butting between union and firefighters and all those things. Not everywhere. And so that was really it was great to see that there's a lot of individuals that are trying to do things. So it's like an understanding of the vastness of limitations that also lay on these chiefs' shoulders. Not everyone has a capacity to do the things that they actually want to do because there's so many decision makers that are involved. I was a little surprised in the research and the data component that there's so much congruency around the world. A lot of us are doing the same thing. We're thinking along the same lines. There's few places that are kind of leading the charge. And then in those places, there's a lot of congruency about what's happening. It's like, oh, what are you doing? Okay. And we do this often in the fire service, right? We try to learn from everybody else. What's peer support 30 years ago? Oh, okay, let's all jump on guard. Let's get a systems team. What's working? What's not working? And we do some studies and change things up and all that kind of stuff. So there were some things that weren't surprising, like I said earlier, it's shocking. And again, not surprised. Like most firefighters you talk to, they happen to know another firefighter who has died by suicide. And some of these things we kind of just like, yep, that's part of the job and move on. Cancer? Oh yeah. Yeah, we all got it. Yep. Move on. So there's like the acceptance of these things. It was a bit surprising to like see the lack of training in this space. And it means very different things in different departments. I think the culture around mental health, I think it's obviously shifting. It's definitely shifting. I think we definitely are moving in the right direction. Like there's so much more conversation that's happening today than there was even prior to COVID, for example, right? I think COVID was a blessing in disguise because it has really opened the doors and opened the conversation. And so that's a part of like, that's happening in culture around the world, not just within the fire service, but that's happening in culture. But still, like over 86% of the departments that we interviewed are only training 1 to 2 times in some form of mental health programming within a firefighter's career. And so like we are desperately lacking consistency in this space and we don't treat it and this is my opinion, right? Most departments are not treating mental health, or should I say physical safety in this, or psychological safety. Let me start that again. Most departments do not treat psychological safety in the same capacity that we do physical safety.
Sure. Yep.
Right. And 100%. I don't think that that's necessarily anyone's fault. However, there is a massive, I don't know what the right word is here. I'm just going to say there's a lot of fear of leadership striving to implement anything mental health related on a consistent manner. There's a lot of check boxes. And when I say leadership, I don't just mean chiefs. I'm talking if you're in a leadership position in the union, if you're in a leadership position as a fire chief, if you're in a leadership position as a captain, as a frontline firefighter, like there's so many layers to leadership. And if we aren't doing the things consistently, if the decision makers of the department aren't consistently trying to solve the problem, but they're just checking a box, doing the same thing over and over again, what benefit is that to the department? There was a lot of messaging, especially in Canada, around that this is a saturated market. And I've heard that from a few chiefs. Oh yeah, the mental health space really saturated. We get phone calls all the day from people trying to sell us programs and different education and these things. But one of the questions we asked in the interview was, what are you doing? How are you training? and they all had used the same programs. Like there's two prominent ones in Canada, right? So they all used the same programs. Most departments had used both over the course of 10 or 12 years, one and then the other. So I don't know where that long list of the saturation of all those other things are. Like, no one's using them.
There's no
Not,
change.
there's no change in my eyes, anyways. There's been no change. So I shouldn't say no change, but you get where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
And so that was really, I thought that was really interesting. And like chiefs were I found them to be very honest and open, right? And there were some chiefs who were like, to be honest with you, I don't know how to spend taxpayers' money on something that I don't know if it's going to work or not. So that was an interesting answer. And okay, maybe you're right. What was interesting was that the departments that had really comprehensive programs and whose at least leaders spoke to the fact that their departments were like they were seeing a lot of success in the well-being of their firefighters. They didn't talk like that. They were like, yeah, well, if there's something that we can implement, then we're going to implement it because we understand that might help one person, and we also understand that we might not ever know who that helped. That person might not even know that course changed the whole direction of their life because of one thing they heard, participated in, whatever. And so when the organizational leadership led with their hearts and implemented consistent methods, they saw positive change and shifts.
Yeah, unfortunately, from what I've seen being in the fire chief world, is those ones that lead by the heart are also the ones that have to leave the fire service due to being basically beaten up mentally. That's the challenge I've seen with that, and I've experienced it myself. So that's why I feel I can speak on that because I've
Sure.
seen it, but I've also experienced it.
I mean, like I said earlier, like there's a lot of chiefs that their hands are tied. They can't just do things. There's examples of chiefs who literally put their job on the line and spent the money without asking for it. And they're like, I guess I'll fight it afterwards, but it's already here. So tough. So it takes grit, right? Like it takes a set. And that like trust is a huge thing for firefighters. When the firefighters see the chief go to bat for them, man, that opens doors.
I would agree.
Yep. It really opens doors. And some maybe don't know how to do that. It's a big decision, right? To put your job and your career on the line for something that you believe in. And it sounds really easy to do, but the reality of that isn't as such. You have your own family, you have your own kids going to college, you have your own bills to pay for. Like there's a whole, it's not a simple, easy thing. They're the places that really seem to be leading the charge, like full transparency, like there's kind of a unicorn effect where you have like at least support from some council, you have a leader in place that's like willing to do it, and they've got a team, and that might be a deputy, it might be a peer support lead who is like willing to take this thing by the horns and just run with it. And so they have people who are all moving the charge forward. And that was big, it was small, it just comes in different places. Usually it's after a catastrophic injury. It's after a catastrophic event that change happens. And this is what we do.
Yep, that's major human right? Civilization right there.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep. And so
yeah.
There's been a lot that like the research was phenomenal. I knew what I knew from my small little window in my position as a firefighter. And so the idea was to get a perspective from leadership of what's happening in mental health within the fire service. And it wasn't intended to be an international research study. It was just like, I'll try to interview 20 or 25 chiefs in Canada, probably mostly in Ontario, and see what happens from there. Next thing you know, I got over 100 chiefs on 5 different continents.
Awesome.
And we learned a lot. So, it's all like valuable information, right? Part of it's like, what you know. And so like the reality of mental health in the fire service is like, now you as a chief need to become a mental health expert and help your firefighters and figure out how to find money that doesn't exist for that thing now. Go. That's the reality of it.
Or at least be the ambassador and find somebody who can do that. Yeah,
Right.
100%.
Right.
You talk in your study about the power of fire chiefs and leaders telling their stories and how important that is to kind of move the gauge of mental health, mental well-being, overall firefighter grit. Want to expand on that just a smidgen?
Yeah. As I started disseminating all of the information that I collected, I found it really fascinating that these departments that, for one, they would score high on the quantitative questioning in relation to like the current state of mental health in their own fire service and their firefighters' abilities to ask for help, these kinds of questions. And then their answers to the qualitative questions, like I said, they were very heart led. They led with their hearts. They were very open. They were very human oriented versus being very policy driven, or we need to find the best attendance management program because there's too many firefighters who are cheating the system, and we got to work on slowing that down. Once we figure that out, then we should be good. And as we got into conversation, one of the last questions I asked was about their own experience with firefighter PTSD and firefighter suicide, and they didn't have to answer any of the questions if they didn't want to. And so a lot of those questions, or sorry, those conversations around that question went deep, and they started sharing their own stories with me about their own struggles, about their own journey with PTSD, about their own challenges with friends who have died by suicide. And I found it fascinating that the departments who seemed to be leading the charge at a global scale from different places on Earth all had leadership who openly shared their stories of their vulnerabilities. And most of them would express that they weren't just doing that with me, but there was this level of importance of them going into the fire station to talk to their chiefs. And sometimes this was of the largest departments in the world, not just like these small volunteer departments, but like chiefs of major cities in the States, like 3 and 4 largest departments in the US, still frequently going into the fire station to have conversations because the belief is that's where lives are saved, at the kitchen table. And so this element of storytelling kind of came up. And then, my father-in-law was a platoon chief, and he was like, guys loved him. He was a little quirky. He was a little different. He did things kind of his own way. But one of the things he did really well was wear his heart on his sleeve. And he was very open about his story, about the things he'd gone through. He pulled 4 kids out of a house fire on my wife's 9th or 10th birthday one year. He also ran combat, and their team won worlds a number of times. And they would go through therapy was something that he was exposed to. Again, this was before firefighting, right? Drafted into the CFL training camp, blew out both your shoulder and your knee with one hit, no more professional football career. And so the healing side of things, both physical and psychological, were very prominent for him. And so, I mean, that's an example, right? But going through the research, it's like, oh, here's other reasons. So here's a person who I know who had this high regard within the fire service. People loved him. He started the fitness and wellness program in his department. And when I looked at all the other leaders of these departments and organizations, it was fascinating to learn that storytelling had such a powerful influence on our lives. So then I consulted with a storytelling expert, like, why is this? Like, why does this matter? And she's like, well, we already do it. It's contagious, right? You walk into the fire station and say, hey, we just went fishing this weekend. We just went hunting. Look at, and everyone starts telling their fishing stories, their hunting stories, whatever it might be. And so when we start sharing different sides of ourselves, it's another way for us to connect to people, right? And it becomes contagious, and then people start asking questions. And so when you are able to identify those individuals within the fire station, for example, who have learned how to share their story and have become in acceptance of their own to be able to do that, it usually shifts a crew, shifts a whole department sometimes, depending on how the story's told, right? So it was a fascinating discovery. Wasn't one that I was looking for or paid any attention to. That just kind of surfaced, and I really think it's one of the most important things that we can do is just learn to tell our own story. And this is like it's so much bigger than that. Like it's so much bigger than just saying, oh yeah, well, this is my experience with therapy or whatever. Like it's so connected to all of us and all the things that we do, and helps us to see different parts of ourselves. Right? Like I share my story. For me, it's selfish. It helps me heal. It helps me get better with those things, and identify where I am now versus where I was. And if someone comes and says, hey, thanks for doing that, like I can relate, it makes me feel good. And it's clearly made an impact on someone else as well. And so if we're not doing that, then what's the result of not doing it?
Super, super powerful, because I truly believe that our leadership, I think they're finding their voice, but it's been mostly the rank and file firefighters who have been sharing their stories, especially around the mental well-being arena, right? So, and I think one of the biggest elements is building trust with your membership through storytelling, being vulnerable. And you noted in your research that trust was a huge barrier to maybe advancing our mental health programs and efficiency and effectiveness. So for the fire chief who's listening right now, how can maybe they think of vulnerability or being open with their crews or the world as a weakness? How would you reframe that instead to make it safe for that fire chief or that leader to be open, vulnerable, and tell stories?
Yeah, I think I think it's really interesting, because to become a chief and a leader within the fire service, um, there's a lot of fear associated with that. There's a lot of things that you have to do that make you uncomfortable, that are challenging, that you need to take risk, even if it's taking time away from your family to study for exams to get a master's degree. There's so much associated with that. You may enjoy it, and there's a lot of risks that most others in your position aren't taking. When you go to the fire, there's a lot of risk. You get comfortable being there, right? So it's just another phase of your life that you need to get comfortable being uncomfortable with. That's all that it is. And it's, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's like you being as a leader took the role to lead, right? And along with that usually is about helping people, not just yourself, but others. And so if you have this capacity to help others in a specific way, why wouldn't you do it? And it's the understanding that it's going to be challenging, it's going to be hard, and it's going to be incredibly rewarding. Incredibly rewarding. Like there might be a lot of chiefs that get to that position and be like, oh, I got here. Now now what do I do? Like it's not what you thought it might have been, right? Because there's a lot of challenges there. And it might also be incredibly rewarding when you get up there and you make a shift and you make a change. And when someone comes up to you and says, hey man, like thanks, like that's it. Like maybe you were put here just to change one person's life, to save one person's life, not everybody's, but just one. And maybe that's your own, right? So I would say, like I don't like sugarcoating things. Like it's hard. It's really hard. It's probably the hardest thing It's probably the hardest thing you might ever go through. But once you go through it, whew, now you have this arsenal, right? You got this massive playbook that you didn't have before in a whole other area of your life. And it's going to change everything, change your entire leadership style. It changes how you're led, changes how people perceive you, changes how you walk, how you talk, how you act, how you feel. It changes everything in a positive manner. So, my advice is like, you're used to doing hard things. That's it. Every day of your life, you're doing something challenging. You're taking a risk and you're doing something hard. You are built for it. Literally, you're built to do it.
Was there any correlation in your study about the happiness or the wellness, the well-being of fire leaders who lead with their heart? Did that ever pop up? Those who led with their heart versus those who didn't. Were they in a better position mentally, physically, spiritually?
I can't say honestly in a specific manner like that.
No.
My
Never popped up
perception
as
is
a
my
yeah,
my perception is yes, just
yeah.
overall, just based on the energy and the conversations that I had with these people. There was no indicators there to determine that from one to the next. But I would say that it's an indicator for sure. For sure.
I
I
was
mean,
thinking
the
more
same
maybe a
frustration.
gut feeling almost that you had.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah. If I
yeah.
had to put a gut feeling on it, yeah, that's a good word. Excuse me. They had a happier demeanor. They were excited about what they were doing. They they spoke from a positive perspective. It didn't mean they were maybe telling me negative things about what they were or weren't doing, um, and didn't mean that individual maybe they didn't have a massively comprehensive program in place or hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars a year to run something. Um, but they were happy and excited. They were open to sharing. They were honest with how they were sharing those things, and they spoke about their firefighters um, from like this perspective of humanity and really caring. Um, Whereas others would more speak to, I guess, like the limitations that were in place. So an example would be like a department had a policy in place where like once you're in insurance hands, we're hands off. We're not allowed to contact that individual. It's up until the insurance tells them that they can return to work. Um, but these chiefs be like, well, okay, and I know you, uh, and so I'm going to write you a handwritten letter, and I'm going to send you a nice message, even though I'm not supposed to do that.
Right.
It
Yeah.
was like little things like that. These little sentimental things that actually I think turned out to be great big, huge.
I'm so happy to hear that change, that evolution we're starting to see in the fire service because, like I said, I not a lot of fire leaders. I know a lot of fire leaders who lead with their heart, but they don't necessarily share that part of them
Yep.
with the
Yeah.
world, right?
Yeah.
So Brandon, as we come to a close, what would be maybe a question that I haven't asked you that you really need to share with the world to really make an impact? Some final words.
Hmm. What's a question that you haven't asked me
Mhm.
that the world needs to hear? That's what you're asking.
Yeah.
It's a good question. Um, Maybe like something self-reflective is like what's kind of like popping in. Um, like, how do I know I'll be okay?
Wow.
Like
So Brandon, how over these years of everything you've learned, the skills, the wisdom, how do you know that everything will be okay for you?
because it always has been, and it
Sounds like
doesn't
you knew
always
that
seem like
answer.
that.
Yeah.
But like that answer keeps coming up. I still ask myself all the time. There's still lots of things that I struggle with. Um, and some of them are old, some of them are new, and there's lots of moments where it's like, man, like I retired, right? I retired from the fire service. There's not this consistent, steady stream of income like there used to be from a financial sense right now. I'm dealing with all kinds of local municipal governments, so there's a lot of headaches there dealing with clients and all this kind of stuff. And I know it's going to be okay because tomorrow happens. So the question, I guess, is how do I know I'm going to be okay? Right? How do I know I'm going to be okay? Um, with my experience, looking back, because sometimes that's like I've found that to be the best way to observe questions that you don't have an answer to, and it's to like look back on my life of like the goals that I've set, the things I've set out to accomplish, the things that I wanted to do. A lot of those things have been achieved, and some of them are still a work in progress. And so it's identifying like where were all those successes, where were all those wins. They happened, and on all those challenging days and those big, huge, challenging events that happened to us, tomorrow happened. Like the sun came up again, and tomorrow still happened. And so time is like time is an interesting thing because it's needed for a lot of things. It's needed to heal. Things don't just always change overnight as much as they do, right? Like a major event happens in a flash, and it's this whole great big, oh my God, like how am I going to be okay after this? Well, one of the things that's needed is time. And so to appreciate that time, to look back, you know, the heartache can still be there. That's that you can be happy and sad simultaneously. This is something that I've learned. Right, you can have multiple emotions happening at the same time about the same event or about different events. So it's just this belief, right? Whether it's real or whether it's unknown, but there's this belief that it's going to be okay because the past has taught me that it's going to be okay, even though we've gone through really challenging things, really hard times, death, all kinds of things. Tomorrow happens, and maybe I can make something of tomorrow or in the next couple of hours. So I think it's a huge fear that maybe we don't put in front of us when we're trying to make big life decisions.
What sticks out for me is that you actually self-reflect and you listen to your answers in your mind. A lot of
I
people, we don't tend to listen to ourselves very often. We tend to
right.
just go through life on autopilot, right? And it sounds like the lessons you've learned have been from listening to yourself.
Meditation has been the meditation and breath work have been the two largest components of my healing. Right, when I looked at like my fitness journey, that's meditation for 17 years, very consistently. I was asked one time, like, well, how do you do it? I'm like, dude, like always, man. What do you mean always? I'm like, just to learn to connect with the breath for a quick moment, whether you're driving in the car, whether you're walking down the street. And there's times where like I sit for long periods of time, cross-legged, I do the thing. um, but it's the introduction and the integration of that into all of life, where it might just be the first sip of the coffee, even though the kids are going crazy in the background, and this self-reflection, like, okay, I'm going to take this quick moment, check in, and kind of move on, right? Um, and the breathwork piece is like it changed my life. Yeah.
I would concur. It's changed my life as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful tool. It's such a powerful tool. And it could seem weird, it could seem silly, it could seem funny, it could seem like, what are you talking about? But just when you work with the right person that understands that skill and that modality, the way that you're able to tap into what's happening in your own experience, in your own past, in your own future, and how it's able to reshape things. It's just been absolutely incredible. And the biggest piece has probably been like, different types of breathing exercises to like just calm down. Okay, I went from 100 to 80. Sweet. That's a huge win. Like this 20% stress that just got relieved off my shoulders in 2 minutes because I did a quick little breathwork session. Okay, that's a bonus, right?
And it's accessible. It's not necessarily free for everyone, but it's pretty darn close, right?
It can be, yeah, like you got to invest, right? And sometimes that's time, sometimes it's energy, sometimes it's money, like
Yep.
that we're investing anyways in things. Um, and then you have these tools that you can use at any given time. So
So this report the study that you've done is super valuable to the fire service,
mhm.
and I believe you have it accessible to our listeners
Yep.
as well. If you could leave us with one section of this report that you say all leaders, all chiefs should read. If you don't have time to read it all today, where should they start? Is there some part of that report that you're like, this is the section that I need everyone to read?
Hmm. Um, which section?
Or or quote or
Yeah, yeah. So
stat.
this is okay. Here's a quote. This is the first quote that popped in, and then I'll give you a section. There's a quote that popped in from a chief who said, "Overtime is corrosive because once it starts, it becomes perpetual and next to impossible to stop." And so there's a piece in the research around overtime as it relates to humanity and how we treat firefighters. Um, and I found it quite interesting. It wasn't something that I looked for. I was looking at how much money do we spend on preventative mental health initiatives. No fire chief could give me a number. What they could share was entire wellness budgets, right? Just kind of how you budget things off. So we collected wellness budgets. And then as chiefs were responding to a question about the increase of their firefighters who were going off on leave and how they were responding to that, overtime came into play. And a couple of chiefs early on started sharing what their overtime budget was for the year and what they would spend on overtime. So I started collecting that information and I found it fascinating. So the global average that we spend on entire wellness for an organization includes staffing is 0.7% of overall operating budgets. We spend roughly 3.8% on average globally on overtime. So we spend 438% more on overtime than we do on entire wellness for our organization. And so that was a really interesting piece to dive into, especially when you look at, well, what's the impact of overtime on your health? Physical health, your mental health, your spiritual health, your psychological health, all of those things. Like sleep deprivation is a thing. We're working more and more. Most departments mentioned that they're seeing an increase of call volume happening. We're going to more calls, so there's higher potential for more exposure to traumatic events, which increases our risk of psychological injury. Where most departments are seeing psychological injury starting to surpass that of musculoskeletal injury for the reason that firefighters are going off on leave. So there was all these like health indicators that like, wow, like overtime isn't good. And most departments are not getting extra budget to fill the gaps of firefighters who have been off for extended periods of leave. So when you're off for 2 to 5 years, for example, plus, they're not they're not hiring someone to replace you. They're just leveraging overtime. And so I learned a lot about overtime. There's many different ways to tie that shoe. There's a lot of mandatory overtime lists that look like voluntary lists and vice versa. So like they're not all the same and they all act differently. In some departments, it flows really beautifully and there's a lot of autonomy for the firefighter, and others have just straight up mandatory overtime lists. Like one of the largest departments in the world, the language they use around their department's overtime when you get placed on the mandatory overtime list is, oh, you're the hostage today. That's the language we're using. You're the hostage. We got you. There's nothing you can do about it. And what was said to me was like, like these firefighters they're not happy with this. It's like they can't plan vacations. They can't plan to go to their missing kids events, school events, sports events, all the things, because it's like, no, you're in 100%. Like you got to come. So it's a fascinating piece when we look at humanity versus overtime. And I think it's something for every single fire chief to at least be aware of, right? These issues aren't happening in every single fire department. That's true, but they are happening in a lot of fire departments. Like we saw an example of one fire department who overspent on their overtime budget in a single year by over 1,400%. You're telling me there's no money for mental health or wellness initiatives at the beginning of the year, but all of a sudden we spent all this extra money because we have to have people on the truck?
Which in turn is making our firefighters not as
well now
mentally or spiritually.
And so we're in a cycle now, right? And this is the corrosive part of that initial quote. This is why this chief had mentioned like firefighting is corrosive. So now post COVID, you had all these firefighters who are off on leave. You have a chunk of firefighters who worked overtime for 2 to 3 years. Guess who's burnt out now? Guess who's done working for those firefighters who still aren't back? Oh, and I'm just like, how do I say this? Doesn't matter. In the province of Ontario, and I don't know if this is true for all departments, but I 100% know it's true for some departments, you actually make more money when you're off on leave than you do sitting in the back of the fire truck. So there's less incentive for you to actually go back to work. It's more incentive for you to just stay being off.
All right.
So
it's like, not a good stat to finish.
are we helping? Well, like this is the reality, right? Are we helping or are we hurting?
Yeah.
Are we helping or are we hurting, right? And how are we helping to get these firefighters back? And if we put ourselves in a position to say, oh, it's off of our shoulders, it's on somebody else's, what are we doing about that? Just accepting it and moving forward and going to beg for more money? And what about the person who's off? Like, what about the people? There's people here. People's lives are on the line.
That's what I always go back to. I always go back to the people. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I'm glad you brought that up, because that overtime was part of my questions in the back of my mind, because that was a number, that 438, I think it was, percentage.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was, when I was reading the report, that stuck out to me. I was like, wow. So I'm glad you brought that up. That's perfect.
It's a big number. It was one that kind of like, I kept going back to it and back to, I'm like, how do I articulate this? Is this right? Is this, anyways, it was, I think it's a big one. Overtime's a huge issue, and I don't think it's getting any better. I think it's only getting worse. And there are already departments that are like, well, what do we do now? We don't have enough people. We don't have enough personnel. It's an issue, a real big issue. There's a lot of retention and recruitment issues happening.
Yeah. It used to be just the volunteer fire service, and now it's the career fire services seeing that retention issue as well.
Yeah. Right? So it's a major concern. And I mean, if we're only looking at one side of health and not the other side, there's a piece that I learned in CrossFit, right? And it was this health continuum. So on one side, you have 0% health, this is basically death. And the other side, you have 100% health, someone who's really healthy. And they put the middle line up, right? It was this semicircle. In the middle is your 50%, right? The further you are away from that 100%, when you get injured, it makes it exponentially more challenging to get back there. And to get there, that doesn't solely rely on therapy and being reactive to an injury. To get there takes preventative work and effort. That's what it takes to become more healthy every single day. It takes consistency, it takes determination, and it takes departments at a leadership level making decisions to actually prioritize health and wellness within the fire department. And so wellness, mental health specifically right now is stuck on, this is my own opinion, it's stuck on, do we make it mandatory or do we make it voluntary? And I believe that the way that we're looking at that currently is simply from a therapeutic lens. We are not looking at that from a fitness lens, because we don't talk that language at any other modality of firefighting that we train. We don't talk about fire suppression. We don't talk about hazmat. We don't talk about technical rescue, auto extrication. We don't talk about mandatory or voluntary. We do it because for our safety, for the safety of our citizens, because it's a requirement of our job. we have all the statistics and research and data out there about the psychological injury side of our job also. And so why haven't we prioritized this yet? Some departments are. Some departments definitely are. But most haven't as much as they think they are. They haven't by any stretch. So we're definitely moving towards it. And I would urge those to like, you got to look at a different lens of our wellness, not just the therapeutic side. We got to look at the fitness side and start upping our game so that they are prepared to fight all of the fires that they come across in their life as a firefighter.
Yeah, well, I think the work you're doing and the report, the study that you put out there into the world is making this momentum roll maybe just a little bit faster. So appreciate that. 100%.
Thank you. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so.
So Brandon, how can people learn more about you? How can they connect with you if they want to? How could they find this report? What would you like to share about that?
Yeah. firetolight.org, right? .org. You can learn a lot about us there. You can fill out a little form to get a copy of the report. We're happy to send it off to anyone who is interested in reading more about the report and learning more about these mental fitness training systems that we've created for fire departments. Our goal is to like integrate mental fitness within your department and take out all the thinking away. We have the whole thing established and set up. Slow drip content for you and your fire department. You can hit me up directly, brandon@firetolight.org. That's my personal email. I'm happy to hear from anyone in the fire service, even if it's just a quick drop. Hey, how's it going? From, yeah, we'd love to learn more. You know, we offer free mental health audits of fire departments. We just jump on a Zoom call. We have a list of questions. We ask them about their mental health and wellness programming. What are you doing? And then we can provide suggestions, some free resources and all that kind of stuff. So there's a number of different ways on social media, Instagram, we're firetolight_firefighters. That's what you'll find us on Instagram.
Brandon, it's been a pleasure. I would kind of summarize this as being an inspiring conversation about the future of the fire service. So
awesome.
That's how I would classify this. Yes.
Great. Thank you.
So to you, the listener, hopefully you enjoyed this great episode today with Brandon and kind of also got inspired a little bit to maybe do your part in the fire service in tweaking it 1% each day, but also tweaking yourself 1% each day and looking at that full preventative measures for when shit does hit the fan. So, all right, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed this great episode. Until next time, stay well. All right, that's a wrap.
Awesome. Thanks, bro.
You betcha.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.